Hello everyone, it's Father Hayes, and we are continuing our series of videos on the Mass, and we have been beginning the early stages of the Liturgy of the Eucharist, talking about the Offertory, the presenting of the gifts of bread and wine. One of the things that we also associate with the Offertory is the collection. And we may think of this as kind of a more recent development, but actually it goes back to the very early church. So in his document called the Apology, and apology means a defense of the Christian faith, St. Justin Martyr, writing to the Roman Emperor around the year 164, 165, says this: when our prayer, and he's referring to the prayer of the faithful, when our prayer is ended, bread and wine mixed with water are brought. And they who are well-to-do and willing gives what each thinks fit. And what is collected is deposited with the president, which means the presiding priest, who supports the orphans and widows and those who through sickness or any other cause or in want, and in those who are in bonds and strangers journeying among us, and in the word takes care of all who are in need. So we can see, dating back to the very early church, and something that was worthy to be mentioned in a defense of the Christian faith to the Roman Emperor, he includes this coming together of the community financially and other material resources. So as part of this part of the Mass, the Offertory, and the presenting of gifts, I thought it would be worth mentioning this and taking a little moment to step aside and reflect on what we call the 5 precepts of the Church. I think there are many Catholics out there who either are aware of the precepts but really never hear about it, or there may be many Catholics, including new Catholics, that have never heard of the precepts of the Church. So what are the precepts of the Church? I want to give a little bit of context. We mentioned again from St. Justin Martyr the idea of, as part of the Offertory and the presenting of the gifts to the priest, this gift of financial support. We also see in some of the letters of St. Paul him referencing a collection being taken up to help the church in another location. But this is, in terms of the precepts of the Church and how they developed, we hear this. As early as the 4th century, we see the Church insisting that its members behave in certain ways. They were to attend Mass on Sundays and special feasts, receive the sacraments of reconciliation and Eucharist, and not get married during Advent and Lent. By the end of the Middle Ages, there was a consensus that Catholics were obliged, now that's a pretty significant word, obligation, obliged. The Catholics were obliged to perform certain practices. St. Peter Cantius, writing in the year 1555, listed 5 precepts, and his list is used in Germany and in Latin America. St. Robert Bellarmine, writing in the year 1589, listed 6 precepts, and his list is followed in France and Italy. The Baltimore Catechism here in the United States listed 6 precepts, and then in 1992 the Church came out with the Catechism of the Catholic Church, and that lists 5 precepts. So whatever the number, the purpose of the precepts has always been to preserve good order in the Church, to maintain discipline within the Church, and to establish a specific Catholic identity. So another way we can think about the precepts is these are positive laws giving us a framework of, in a way, a bare minimum of what it means to be a practicing Catholic. So in the Catechism, starting with paragraph 2041, it says this: the precepts of the Church are set in the context of a moral life bound to and nourished by liturgical life. So right there we have an important distinction that our life as Catholics is bound to and nourished by the liturgy, the liturgical life of the Church, which includes certainly the Mass, but also the sacraments. The obligatory character of these positive laws decreed by the pastoral authorities is meant to, number one, to guarantee the faithful the very necessary minimum in the spirit of prayer and moral effort, in the growth in love of God and of neighbor. So these precepts of the Church are the bare minimum in terms of disciplines to help us in the spirit of prayer and moral effort and our growth of love of God and neighbor. So what are the 5 official precepts of the Church as articulated by the Catechism of the Catholic Church? Well, in paragraph 2042, it says the first precept, which is you shall attend Mass on Sundays and holy days of obligation and rest from servile labor. Now notice that says you shall attend Mass on Sunday, all Sundays. So it doesn't mean that if you're on vacation, you can take Sundays off. All right. The first precept of the Church is you shall attend Mass on Sundays and all holy days of obligation. Now, unless of course there's something beyond your control that is limiting you. So, of course, with the COVID pandemic, there's some people that are participating in Mass via live stream. If you have serious health issues or something that's beyond your control, that's a different story. But as a norm, the first precept of the Church is you'll attend Mass on Sundays and the holy days of obligation. The paragraph in the Catechism goes on to say this. This requires the faithful to sanctify the day commemorating the resurrection of the Lord, as well as the principal liturgical feasts honoring the mysteries of the Lord, the Blessed Virgin Mary, and the saints. In the first place, by participating in the Eucharistic celebration in which the Christian community is gathered, and by resting from those works and activities which could impede such sanctification of these days. And again, that rest is a little bit broadly interpreted, so some people, their work schedules have them working on Sunday because of their job. This is not necessarily what the Church is articulating there. But the idea is any unnecessary things that will take you away from really entering into and meditating on the mystery of Sunday and the mystery of the Lord's Day. And Pope John Paul II wrote a document called Deus Dominus on the Lord's Day that I would encourage everyone to look up on the internet and read. And he gives a much deeper theological explanation of this Sabbath rest. So that's the first precept of the Church. The second precept is you shall confess your sins at least once a year. This is, again, another thing that I think a lot of Catholics don't realize. Right? Minimum of once a year you should be going to confession. Practically speaking, you should be going to confession at least once a month, or if you're aware of serious sin, more regularly, or to address a specific issue. Second precept ensures preparation for the Eucharist by reception of the Sacrament of Reconciliation, which continues baptism's work of conversion and forgiveness. So we have to see confession within the context of continuing to prepare us to more worthily and more fruitfully receive the Eucharist. The third precept, you shall receive the sacrament of the Eucharist at least during the Easter season. Older Catholics will remember this as the Easter duty. But bare minimum, if for some reason you're refraining from receiving the Eucharist, other than because of serious sin or because of some kind of impediment, you should, as the precept of the Church says, that you must receive at least during the Easter season. And this guarantees a minimum. Again, hear the language here. We're talking about bare minimums, right? So this is not all you have to do. This is the bare minimum that you should be doing as a practicing Catholic. But the third precept guarantees as a minimum the reception of the Lord's body and blood in connection with the Paschal feasts, the origin and center of the Christian life. And then in the Catechism, paragraph 2043, we hear this. The fourth precept of the Church is you shall observe the days of fasting and abstinence established by the Church. And this fourth precept ensures the times of self-discipline and penance. That's the purpose of fasting. It's not that the Church is giving us a bunch of hoops to jump through or a bunch of arbitrary things that they can hold over us. But it's intended to be a bare minimum to keep us in a spirit of self-discipline and penance, again, preparing us for these significant liturgical feasts, and to help us acquire mastery over our instincts and freedom of heart. Finally, we get to the fifth precept, and this is where we began. Fifth precept is, you shall help to provide for the needs of the Church. And the fifth precept means, and this is again according to the Catechism of the Catholic Church, that the faithful are obliged, so there's that word again, obligation. The faithful are obliged to assist to the best of their ability with the material needs of the Church. Okay, so doesn't mean that you have to give your entire life savings to the Church. But every single Catholic should be supporting the material needs of the church. Things from simple things like, the bread and the wine that we purchase for Mass, we have to buy them from somewhere, right? That there's a cost there. The candles, we have to replace the candles. The cleaning of the church, the maintaining of the physical campus. These are all things that a lot of times people don't really take into consideration, as well as some of the major apostolates on the parish level and on the diocesan level. So just as we heard from St. Justin Martyr back in the year 164 or 165, all the way to our present day, there is the assertion that as part of the mystical body, as part of the Catholic faith, all Catholics, not just 30%, all Catholics have an obligation to the best of their ability to help the church with its material needs and its material mission. But within the deeper context, we tie this to what we heard in the last video about that act of gift of self, that act of making yourself united with Christ as sacrificial victim at this particular point in the Mass. So there's layers of meaning here that we really need to rediscover and to really allow ourselves to go deeply into, to really get a better sense of who we are and what our true mission is. May God be with you.